Stop motion animation is a unique, beautiful art form that combines the tangible world with limitless nature of creativity. On this episode of Make It Till You Make It, we're joined by award-winning animation director Michael Granberry. We're going to talk about what sets stop motion apart and how to bring those stories to life. Michael, you've worked on some of the biggest shows and films over the last few years. Severance, films like Guillermo del Toro's Pinnochio, Tiny Chef, and Tumble Leaf. What is it about stop motion animation that feels so magical and sets this genre apart?
The thing about stop motion, I believe, is the fact that we are filming real objects with real cameras using real light. And what that gives us is the opportunity to use texture. Textures give or create different emotional responses. When designers and directors are working on shows in the early stages, one of the biggest conversations that they're having is about the textures that they're going to be seeing because these textures can create a certain response. So, for instance, on a show like Tumble Leaf that you mentioned, which is a beautiful preschool series, we wanted to evoke certain things for them. Feelings of safety, of softness, of accessibility, approachability, things like that, to create this world where kids would feel comfortable and confident, watching it and not being scared or not being, kicked out of it and things like that. And not only did it seem to have the effect that we wanted to get from the preschoolers who were watching it, we started to get a lot of fan mail from the parents of these kids, and they could see the work that and the thought that had been put into building this whole world, and they were mesmerized by it, and they wanted to introduce their kids to it.
One thing that I've really loved about festivals is being able to meet other animators and creators like
Mm,
yourself. Like the first time we got to meet was at PF Cat,
yeah.
and you got to see weirdos on the big screen for the very first time.
Yes. Yep.
Right? It's a monster hunting show about all these kids running around the woods, trying all these different monster catching weapons. Can you recall a little bit of your experience as you watched Weirdos for the first time on that big IMAX screen?
Yeah, I was thinking this show was made for 8-year-old Michael Granberry. That's what I thought. I was like, here it is. This is the show I
Yeah.
wanted. It's got stop motion, it's got kids, it's got monsters, it's got everything that I was looking for as a kid. And you know, it
Mhm.
it 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 also is just such an invitation into the world. It's like it was scary, but not like terrifying. It empowers the child to be able to conquer the thing, the monstrosity, or tame it, or understand it, or get it under control. I think that there's something to be said for not for having the strength of your convictions. Is like that. Yes, this is a monster show, and there are monsters in it, and
Right.
kids love
And just staying
monsters.
with monsters. Yeah, are you kidding me? Exactly. So it's kind of like Pokemon goes ghost busting.
Absolutely. And you could just design monsters forever. I mean, it's like what a dream job that is. Any
Yeah.
designers is like, yes, once you get your main cast figured out, you're good to go. Now let's go design a season's worth of monsters.
All of the puppets on Tumbleleaf are so beautiful, and the teeny tiny stitching and all of the clothing and the amount of details in a show like Tumbleleaf or
Mm,
Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio
mhm.
is astounding.
I was literally the last animator hired onto Pinocchio, and I came in and they let me watch a rough cut of the film on my first day, and my jaw was in my lap. I was just like, "Oh my gosh!" There was enough still left to be filmed that you really saw, how the textures and the tone of that film, or how much of the tone of that film was being dictated by the textures of these characters. It's like there was a warmth, but it could very easily turn to a coldness, like
Hmm.
there's this, you had this warm dynamic between Geppetto and Pinocchio, but they were within this world that was like experiencing this this fascist wave that was sort of rolling through. So depending upon the lighting and the camera angles, suddenly a very warm and loving scene could turn into something that was very scary and very dark. And
Yeah.
I put so much of that to the design and to texture, and I think that's something that stop motion inherently does, and does really well when thought is put into it.
Absolutely. What were some of the scenes that you got to work on in
Oh,
Pinocchio?
the sequence it's in later in the film, when Geppetto and Pinocchio and the cricket are trying to escape from inside the whale, or the dogfish as it's called, in
Yeah.
the film, and they uh they climb up in on top of theirs. This fish is so big he's swallowed a
Hmm.
lighthouse, which is still working, and so they climb up to the top of this lighthouse, and in order to get from the lighthouse to the blowhole of the fish, Pinocchio has to lie to make his nose grow, and they use his
Yeah.
nose as a bridge to get across, and to escape from the fish. And
All of a sudden, that giant flaw that he had is now the
is now
one
the
thing that they
that
need.
saves him exactly. So they
Hmm.
let him. So he lies his little pants off, and they manage to run across this thing, and it was just a handful of shots, but it was like, because I was coming in late, I didn't really have the time to
Hmm.
get up to speed and the detail that everybody else had months to perfect. I was very happy as like my shots were three of my favorite flavors. They were fast, dark, and far away. So,
Some of the voiceover acting, too, with Geppetto talking about how much of a bother Pinocchio is to him.
yeah, the father-son dynamic seems to play, a large role in a lot of Guillermo's films, or the father-child dynamic, and that was very much the case, in Pinocchio as well. But yeah, the scene where Pinocchio says, "I don't want to be a burden." It's like none of us
Right.
do, but that is a heavy thing for a child, to like realize that that's what they are. And and it was a very mature film, and I think one of the reasons it became mature, or was discussed more maturely, is because Geppetto doesn't really think of Pinocchio as a child, and so he says things that he would say to a much older
Sure.
person.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if that's because he had no experience with him as a baby. So he's not spending
Right.
those years. He's a baby and then he's got to raise him. It's
Right.
like he's instantly a boy.
Yeah, and I think it's good that they showed I'm sorry, the relationship between the actual son, Carlo, who is
Hmm.
killed early on. The way that Geppetto reacts with Carlo is the way that you would think of a father interacting with a son. And then he gets Pinocchio there, and it's like there's just he's not even thinking of it as a child. He's thinking of it as a golem, that he's suddenly responsible
Yeah.
for.
So even though I'm a stop motion guy, I'm
Mhm.
doing my very first 3D animated short film right now.
Congratulations.
It's a completely different experience.
Sure.
What I love about stop motion animation is you see the puppet all fully built out, all
Yes.
textured, and it's in the set, and you make the changes before you start animating anything. With
Hmm.
3D, it's opened us up to we can make revisions at any time. We just got
Hmm.
our first 30 seconds back. Um, and we're like, wow, this is going to be stunning. This is going to be out of sight. Um,
Yeah.
can you tell me about how Labette came to be?
Sure. I came across this large box in my garage of very, very old puppets that I had constructed almost 2 decades before, when I was first starting stop
Wow.
motion, for various films or videos or whatnot that never got filmed. And then I just thought, what if I put all of these characters in a film together? One of my beliefs is that like as a filmmaker, and as particularly an indie filmmaker, you never have a lot of money and stuff, but you have to, consider what assets you do have.
Sure, yeah.
What kind of materials you got in your shop or things like that. And I was like, this is a very interesting and unique chunk of assets that I have and no one else on earth has. So I took some stills and I put a black and white filter on it and I took out all that color information. And immediately it reminded me of a 1930s Ladislas Starevich animation. He was one of
Oh,
the great, grandparents of stop motion animation. So I started it out as a sort of uh, a a tribute to his work. There was no script, there were no storyboards. It was all shot kind of in sequence because I didn't know where it was going to go. There was a point where it took a turn, like it moved away from being a tribute to Starevich, and it just sort of became, the story that the puppets were telling, which I kind of wanted that to happen when I first put them all out on the table the first time. I literally, this will sound strange to most people, but it won't to you because but I
because I'm
said,
a puppet person.
I said, tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. And, and that was my bond with these puppets. It's like
Hmm.
whatever they
Puppet
feed me,
overlords, puppet gods,
exactly.
if you
What
will.
whatever they tell me to do, that's what I'm gonna do. So it was again, it was just like constantly the puppets were kind of surprising me by like, oh my gosh, I never would have consciously come up with this idea, but because these characters are just here, and this works and this looks really cool, it just evolved in the most kind of spectacular way. I
Hmm.
was reminded by someone that Hayao Miyazaki, the legendary Japanese animator, does not, storyboard his entire films. He just kind of lets it evolve and grow as he's making the movie. And this was very much that.
And how freeing for you,
It
right? It's
was,
like you
yes.
set out to make something and take back some of the control
Mm,
that you experience from the professional animation world into your own personal project.
mm,
And I think the thing that blows me away about Les Bêtes is how many puppets are on screen at the same time, and they all have unique individual movement, as like whether it's the octopus sea
mm,
diver
mm.
or the bugs, or like it's so visually impressive that I remember watching it at PF Cat with you, and the whole screen, this is an IMAX screening of this showing, and it left people, their jaws were dropped wide open. You've had a really successful run with Les Bêtes. You even got to take it to Annecy.
Man, I
Can you
tell
tell me
you,
a little bit what that's like?
I started getting acceptances like immediately. People were responding not just to the film, but also to the backstory of how it came about and how it was made. I think the idea of all those
Mm-hmm.
puppets sitting around for 20 years gathering dust and starting to disintegrate was a huge thing. They're like, wow, look what you did with, trash. so,
Look what
but
you
I
did with
did have
trash.
to wait quite a while for Annecy, to
Mm-hmm.
hear back from that. Annecy has sort of like different tracks. There's like student films, commercial films. There's the official competition, and they had
Mm-hmm.
3,900 submissions for that, and they selected 35, which is less than 1% for the
So what's
competitive
that? One in a
section.
thousand?
Something like that. A little, yeah, a little, yeah,
Beat out.
right.
And then you
And
won.
and then we
You
were
won
the
an award
well,
at Annecy.
we were the only film from the United States that was
Mm-hmm.
selected for the official competition, which was incredible.
Wow.
So to me,
Congratulations.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I have to
Isn't that
go.
wild?
So for me, getting to
Yeah.
go to Annecy was the prize. And then we wound up
Yeah.
winning two awards. We won the Vimeo Staff Pick Award, which was announced on Friday night, which was great. It got us a lot of viewership that we would not have gotten otherwise. And then the following night, on closing night, we won the jury award, which I was
Wow.
very unprepared for. That was
Yeah.
the whole week was so incredible. Annecy is so huge. It's over 18,000 people go to this. It's not just a film festival, it's a conference of animation and animators. And it's like spring break because it's mostly college students and it's on a beach and it's in France. And
Hmm.
nobody ever told me there was an animator spring break, but this was it.
And that's one thing that I also really love about PFCat is in Portland when you have that many stop motion animation studios together,
Mm,
those audiences for the stop motion blocks tend to be all the craftspeople, all the puppet builders, all the set builders, directors, animators, producers, everybody who loves stop motion. You almost couldn't get a more perfect audience for these films.
the crowd for the stop motion block was wrapped around the interior of the building. it
Right.
was the biggest audience, and it was a who's who of local stop motion. I mean, just like you
Oh yeah.
said, I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my gosh, the the excitement, but also the pressure. I was glad this past summer I didn't have a film in there. It's like this is everybody is here to see your work, and
Hmm.
these are the people who have seen it and done it again, and like know their stuff. And that's so great for I think especially for younger animators who are getting their
Hmm.
work out there. To me, it's not about it's not about the finished thing as much as it is the fact that you finished it,
Right. The
because
fact that you did
to,
it.
yeah, to get
That's
to
what
get
make it
anything
till you
done.
make it is all about, right?
Yeah,
It's not waiting for permission. It's not waiting for this studio to come in and save you and spend
yeah,
all their money on making your own thing. It's like because you took some chances and bet on yourself, you made Labette. I got to make Weirdos, and we've gotten to be able to share that with thousands of people around the globe. It resonates with people
yeah.
because they want to see something real. And that's the power of stop motion that it brings, that unlike other art forms.
I look at these films, particularly personal films, ones that don't have the force of a studio and all those resources behind it. It's a snapshot in time of who you are,
Mm-hmm.
just who you are right now. So your graduation, your thesis film is not going to look like your, 50th film you've made as an independent animator is out there. It's not going to look like your 100th film. God, you lucky you should make that many. But it's like they're all just these moments in time, and you're growing even during that time. When I started on Labette, in January of 2020, and then I worked on it pretty solidly for about 6 months, until we were able to go back to work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then I basically had to put it aside for almost 2 years. And in that, because we finished Wendell Wild, then I worked on Pinocchio, I worked on Severance, the Tiny
Mm-hmm.
Chef show, and I was only able to. It wasn't until we before In the Know started. I had this block of about 5 months between
Mm-hmm.
the end of Pinocchio and the start of In the Know. I was like, I'm just going to try to hit this really hard right now and see how much of it I can get done. And what I found was that, and it was the hardest part. It was like Act Three, which is just this sort of this chaotic, mayhem of, everything goes insane. But I was also 2 years better as an animator, having finished two feature films, and so my
Oh, so that
work,
last, that third act,
yes,
that third act was filmed 2 years later?
was filmed 2 years later after I got two
Wow.
years more experience. So I got better as an animator. And if I had not had those 2 years, I don't know that I would have had the confidence to attack that third act the
Yeah.
way it had to be attacked. So we are always growing as long as we're always working, because there's a saying, you're always chasing your best work. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe that to be true. It's like your best work is always kind of out there in front of you. And I'm grateful for the fact that that I had this long intermission to take what I had been doing with these puppets that were falling apart and just put them on the back burner for a while and sort of rethink, or just think about, things that, or just not think about it at all, honestly, for a while, just give my brain a total vacation and to look at it again,
Sure.
look at it fresh. And so when I see somebody's thesis film and they're compelled to apologize before I even watch it, I just want to say you don't apologize for your best attempt, where
Yeah.
you were at that moment. I am proud of you. And I haven't even seen this thing yet. I know I'm going to be delighted.
Right. You finished it and you're at a
Yeah.
festival, you're rolling the dice and you're putting your art out there, and that should be commended.
I mean, just finishing anything is difficult. It's like the hardest thing in the world is to like finish a film, and the easiest thing in the world is to quit or never try.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you took the harder path for sure.
Well, hey, I'm super excited to see the next project you're going to be working on.
Oh,
And I
thanks.
know we'll be running into each other at a festival soon. Michael, thanks so much for joining me on Make It Till You Make It. You're living proof that if you roll the dice and bet on yourself, you can make something beautiful and really make an impact in stop motion. Thanks
Oh,
so much,
thank you,
bud.
Paul. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure.